Today, I'd like to walk you through some helpful tips for how to break down and organize your copy of Attack the Darkness by Protean Games. Now, as you can see, the box that Attack the Darkness comes in is quite large, and it contains quite a few components. When you first open it up, you'll notice that there's a rulebook sitting in a conveniently designed insert within the card tray. What that means is that even after you've organized the box and taken all the pieces out, it'll still fit very nicely and allow the box to close flush. Once you have the rulebook out of the way, you'll notice that there are quite a few standard-sized playing cards. They come in two different types. There are resource cards, which are black-backed, and there are action cards, which are white-backed. Every character in Attack the Darkness is made up of two different decks, an action deck and a resource deck. There are 7 different character classes, and in order to make the game quick to play out of the box, the cards have been organized so that each of those character classes has a starting deck that you can play with without having to learn anything about how to create characters. If you take the cards out of the box, in the order that they are in the box, as I'm doing here, and then lay them next to each other, it becomes very easy to then organize them into those 7 starting decks. Once you've got them out, all you need to do is lay them out in this order and then turn them sideways. And what you'll see as you do so is that you end up with bands of black and white cards. And these are, in fact, all of those decks, plus the extra cards that come to allow for customization of your characters. If you simply start from this end, the first 2 slices here, the white and black, that's a character deck. The next 2 is a character deck, and so forth. So there are 7 character decks across these different packages. Each package contains 100 cards, but each character is actually made up of 54 cards, 27 action cards and 27 resource cards. So the character decks actually span the different packages. Once you get to the end, this right here is the last of the character decks. All of the action cards after that are simply extra cards for customization, and then extra resource cards also for customization. Once you've taken all of the action cards and resource cards and converted them into their class decks, and then the bonus action cards and resource cards, there are a few more components within the box to deal with. The first is this deck of large format cards. Now, within this deck, you're going to find the character cards that make up the, effectively, character sheets for the different classes within the game. You will also find a special stairs card that represents the beginning of every dungeon. And then lastly, all of the dungeon cards that make up the dungeon deck. These represent the monsters and the equipment that you'll find and so forth. All of these break down very quickly and nicely. Once you take them out of the packaging, they fit right back into the box. Additionally, you'll find that you have here a nice little resealable container full of all of the tokens that represent both the characters as well as all the monsters you'll run into. You've also got stands that go with these. Now, I find that these fit perfectly well within the same little cubby. Lastly, you have a deck of advancement cards. These represent abilities that characters gain during the course of play. And again, I personally find that there's no reason not to put them right in there, so that the box can close up nice and well, but leave you a little extra space to separate some of your cards. Now that you've got everything broken out, I want to give a few tips on how to put everything back together to make it really easy to get into and play without having to fuss around too much with the cards. First of all, all of the character decks, because they are individual characters, it's good to keep them separate, because then you can very quickly go in and from game to game, if you want to play different characters, pull out the ones you need, and not have to worry about sorting things out. Now, these wells are pretty deep, which is good because they hold a lot, but it's bad because sometimes it's a little difficult to get things out of the bottom of them, particularly if what you have is only a few cards down there. So now what I did to deal with that was I made some of these. Now, it may not be obvious what this is, but it's very simple. All this is an index card that was folded over the long way and then folded over a couple times to create a little wedge. So you can see right there, all I've got is one half of it was folded in on itself a couple times and then stapled. Now the reason I did this is once you do that, and I've created a few of these, you can just put these right down into these wells. And once you've done that, it's going to make this much easier to take these cards back out if you want to keep them separate like this. I even made a special one. This one's a little different for this. You know, as I said, this is usually used out of the factory to hold some of the stands, but I find that it can hold cards perfectly well, and if you make one of these that's a little shallower, you can pull off the same thing here. And what I do is I take the character decks and I take them in a specific order. I start with the Inquisitor, put it right here, the Magician right here, the Scion right here, the Assassin, the Champion, the Templar, and then lastly the Samurai. Now the reason I do that in that order is that there is a mnemonic used on the cards. So at the bottom of any card, there are some letters which tell you who can actually use it. And you'll notice that if all of the classes can use it, it says, as shows here, impacts: Inquisitor, Magician, Scion, Assassin, Champion, Templar, Samurai. Anytime there's a restriction on who can use it, it'll instead just list who can use it. So for example, this card, Hardy, can only be used by the Champion, so it only has a C. Because of that mnemonic, if I lay them out, Inquisitor, Magician, Scion, Assassin, Champion, Templar, Samurai, it's really quickly obvious, to me at least, which deck to pull out if I want it. Additionally, each class has what's called a core card. It makes up almost half of their resource deck, and it's specific to those classes. And so I also like to put a copy of that core card on top of the deck, because that's just another quick reminder. You know, if you see and look over here and say, calculating, well, calculating is the core card of the Assassin, and so I know immediately this must be the Assassin deck. Now, of course, there are these two wells over here, and I have quite a few more cards. These are all the bonus cards for customizing decks. So what to do with those? Well, I went back to my set of index cards, and I created a couple little inserts. All I did was just kind of eyeball it, folded these, and what that does, if I put these in here, so I can then take all of these, drop them in, they all fit nicely, and what you'll notice here is all of this can now be taken out very quickly. Like if I want these cards, I can just lift them up right out because of that insert, and I don't have to go digging down there. That's also true of all of the decks, the character decks. So I can quickly say, here's the Magician. And even with this, all of this, the rule book fits nicely on top, and the whole box goes right back together.